On 33 CE, Jesus was crucified but resurrected, an act which started Christianity. In 91 CE, Prince Yamato Take of Japan defeated Kyushu rebels while wielding the sacred sword Kusanagi no Tsuruguri, also known as Grasscutter, that had been imbued with his warrior's soul. The five wanted to steal the sword. They were an inner circle of the Sickly One's acolytes. The Sickly Ones were the spawn of the Elder Gods, pre-humanity, or something else entirely, including a cabal of cold-blooded alien reptiles arrived on Earth in pre-human times. They worshipped the beast, killing what lived. Under various forms they carried on their mission: dishonor God by destroying what He's made. The Sickly Ones remain in a secret city shrouded by forest deep in the Valley of Mercy and Wrath. Their acolytes, the five, coveted the Kusanagi no Tsuruguri, intending to use it to master all of Japan. Their forces were defeated by the chaste, mystic warriors who held evil back for centuries. Their conflict would go on as a stalemate for over 2 millennia. In 114 CE, the city of Luoyang was visited by the celestial Madonna, the first celestial to ever become pregnant. Zhang Heng, leader of the Brotherhood of the Spear, convinced the celestial into using the sun to give birth to its child instead of destroying the earth or the moon to acquire the necessary energy for the process to be carried on. The child was placed in the sun, but its conception would take 1,842 years. By 281 CE, Apocalypse began recruiting a group of final horsemen as a contingency plan, collecting Decimus Furius, a Roman mutant who looked like a minotaur and fought in the Colosseum, worshipped as the dark god Asterion. Apocalypse stored him away to awaken later. In the 4th century, Apocalypse's next recruit for his final horseman contingency plan was Sanjar Javid, the illegitimate son of Shapur II of Persia, whose mutant ability to transmit terminal diseases spread death among his town, even killing his father. When the West Roman Empire fell, Ulysses Bloodstone traveled to China, where he fought against Fin Fang Foom. In 6th century Britain, sorcerer and royal advisor Merlin became aware that the union of King Uther Pendragon and Igraine was destined to produce a great king. So he magically arranged for the two of them to sleep together. Igraine fell pregnant and later, after marrying Uther, birthed a son, Arthur. Merlin entrusted the infant to the knight Sir Ector to be raised anonymously, and tutored him as he grew up as squire to Ector's son Kay. When Uther died 15 years later, Merlin summoned the kingdom's nobles to London, where he placed in a churchyard a magical sword plunged through a stone anvil and into a marble block. Inscribed on the anvil were golden letters: "Whosoever pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is knightwise king born of all Britons." When Arthur was sent to fetch a sword for Sir Kay, he stumbled across the churchyard and, unaware of the significance, pulled the sword free. He was crowned king, as Merlin had planned. With Merlin as his advisor, Arthur established the kingdom of Camelot. At some point, Arthur met Morgause, and, overcome with passion, they slept together, each unaware they were half-siblings. That night, Arthur had a vivid nightmare that a serpent sprang from his side, destroyed his kingdom, and fought him to the death. Hearing this, Merlin predicted Arthur would have a son born on May Day who would destroy both him and Camelot. Hoping to prevent this, Arthur collected all the noble sons born that day, including the infant Mordred, the offspring of his union with Morgause, and sent them out to sea on a leaky boat. However, Mordred survived, his cradle washing ashore where a fisherman found it. Meanwhile, another of Arthur's half-sisters, Morgan Le Fay, became Merlin's student, but Camelot's support for the new Catholic faith over the old Celtic gods eventually turned her against both her mentor and the king. When peace was finally established following the Battle of Badon, Merlin advised Arthur to take a wife. Arthur proposed to Guinevere, despite Merlin prophesying that this choice would prove disastrous. Merlin, meanwhile anticipating Mordred's future threat, mentioned Sir Percy of Scandia to oppose the evil influence of Arthur's illegitimate son. Sir Percy, acting willingly as Merlin's agent, publicly played the flop. Privately, however, he used the identity of the Black Knight to defend the realm of King Arthur from any threats. A guild of warlocks and magic users plotted to overthrow Arthur and give power back to the common people. To achieve their goals, the guild harnessed the power of the Spirit of Eternity to create the Eternity Mask, a mystical mask that made its wearer the equal of their opponent. The Black Knight was dispatched to locate the guild's hideout, where he encountered their champion, who was wearing the mask. After 3 straight days of fighting, the Black Knight finally killed his adversary. The guild retreated, taking the mask with them. The mask would survive into the modern day, passing through many hands and influencing key events in human history. Later, the malevolent nether gods sought to conquer Camelot, but the mystic Green Knight empowered Arthur and his knights with ancient spirits, dubbed Knights of Pendragon, in the king's honor, strengthening them so they could drive the nether gods back. After learning his true heritage, Mordred turned against the king and secretly allied with Morgan Le Fay. Aware that Arthur would not believe ill of Mordred without absolute proof, Merlin summoned the Black Knight to defend the king incognito and help him defeat a string of foes, most Mordred's allies, who tried to seize Camelot. Camelot began to decline, and Merlin tried to restore the kingdom by suggesting to Arthur a quest to find the Holy Grail. But Sir Galahad, Camelot's most innocent knight, vanished on the quest, and the Grail was never retrieved. Merlin wanted to teach Tommy Time a lesson about magic, so the wizard tricked the boy, activating his Clock of the Ages and sending him back in time to England in the 6th century. There, Tommy assisted Merlin in rescuing the captured King Arthur from an evil Black Knight with no relation to Sir Percival. When Tommy returned to his own time, he had learned a greater appreciation and belief in magic. Morgan Le Fay and her Darkholders, a cult of mystics she formed around the power of the Darkhold, tried to summon the elder god Chthon, but found themselves overwhelmed by him, and they resorted to imprisoning the elder god inside Wundagore mountain of Transia. Chthon's evil entered into the clay and wood of Wundagore, and could be used as a sort of sympathetic magic by forming images of people used to manipulate said people from a distance. Morgan's tower became the resting place for the Darkhold itself, bound by spells to prevent it from being used for evil. Young sorcerer Mordred, with no relation to Mordred the Evil, entered the tower, intending to harness the power of the Darkhold for good. The other, a manifestation of Chthon, appeared to Mordred and tried to bargain for his soul. Mordred refused to give up his soul to the demon, but when his ladylove Janice entered the tower and Chthon's field of influence, Mordred sacrificed his soul to spare Janice's. When the other and his forces attacked, Merlin and St. Brendan combined their forces to banish them, and Brendan scattered the Darkhold pages across the world. However, the monk Elfric came to worship Chthon and assembled the pages once again. Chthon formed a pact with Sagbada, god of the Vodou, for his own dark reasons, and created an army of undead reanimated corpses, the first zombies. When the Black Knight and Merlin were away battling Morgan Le Fay, the immortal alien Mahayogi impersonated Merlin. He demanded that Mordred serve him as an apprentice, and act with dire consequences for Mordred, who foolishly sought the Darkhold against Mahayogi. As punishment, Mordred was placed in suspended animation. At the same time, a time traveler from the future, Kang the Conqueror, attacked the kingdom of Camelot. He quickly incapacitated Mahayogi, whom he believed to be Merlin, and bested Arthur and his knights of the Round Table. He then took over the kingdom of Camelot and began using his advanced intelligence to help the knights construct sophisticated weapons for that era in the hopes of conquering the earth. However, Kang's attempt to take over the 6th century was witnessed by the Watcher named Uatu, who brought the Fantastic Four's Human Torch and the Thing into the past to stop Kang. While the Thing battled Kang's forces, the Torch freed the fake Merlin. When the wizard disabled Kang's power source, the two heroes easily defeated him, forcing Kang to flee back to his own time. In time, the Eternal Circe and the returning true Merlin defeated Mahayogi, placing him in suspended animation. When Morgan and Mordred exposed an affair between Knight of the Round Table Sir Lancelot and Queen Guinevere, a heartbroken Arthur, bound by his own laws, reluctantly sentenced the adulterers to death, but Lancelot rescued Guinevere, triggering a civil war. Such a betrayal contributed to the fall of Camelot and the dissolution of the Knights of the Round Table. Morgan and Mordred took the opportunity to move against the weakened kingdom time and time again. Romulus Augustulus, the last emperor of the Roman Empire, took on the title of Tyrannus, and became a servant of the Olympian god Pluto, who empowered the former emperor and sent him to destroy Merlin. Tyrannus lost against the Black Knight and abandoned his master Pluto, ending with Merlin banishing Tyrannus beneath the earth to the realm known as Subterranea. Trapped beneath the earth, Romulus came upon a stockpile of deviant technology which he used to attack the surface world. On one such attack, he discovered the Fountain of Youth, which allowed him to remain young through the centuries. Another player present at this point in time was Mephisto, who granted refuge to Morgan Le Fay in his realm in exchange for a piece of the sword Excalibur. Later, two other time travelers arrived from the future, Iron Man and Doctor Doom. Doom allied himself with Morgan, who reanimated the corpses of everyone slain by Excalibur. Doom led this undead army against Camelot, but Arthur and his knights battled them until Iron Man forced Morgan to end her spell. Finally, Mordred attacked Camelot again, and at the Battle of Camelot, he and Arthur inflicted mortal wounds on each other. The once great kingdom of Camelot fell. Arthur's remains were transported to Avalon in the mystical otherworld to await resurrection in Britain's time of greatest need. Meanwhile, Merlin rebuilt Camelot in Avalon beside the Great Rift, which bordered Otherworld and the Netherworld, to stand guard between both realms. In Denmark, the heroic Beowulf vanquished the giant half-elf Grendel and his mother. Although Grendel survived, there are contradictory accounts of what happened to his mother, with some saying Beowulf slew her, and others that he imprisoned her with help of the sword Excalibur. At the same time as these events unfolded, Thor protected Denmark from two symbiote dragons sent by Null. Ulysses Bloodstone and the Eternal Gilgamesh performed heroic acts at the same time, so it is unknown who exactly inspired the legend of Beowulf slaying a dragon. Thor's actions, in particular, severed Null's connection to his hive mind. While one of the symbiote dragons was frozen in ice, most of the others destabilized and dispersed into individual symbiotes, which sought out hosts to fill the void left by their disconnection from Null, eventually rebelling against him and imprisoning him in the heart of the symbiote throne world, which they renamed Glintar. Pieces of the Grendel symbiote fell to Earth and bonded to human hosts, who joined a symbiote-worshipping cult and dedicated it to worshipping Null and freeing him from his prison. Ashamed of their dark origins, the symbiotes of Glintar invented and perpetuated a lie that their species was naturally benevolent. Endeavoring to spread peace throughout the universe, the symbiotes established a hive mind capable of sensing the voice of the cosmos and created an intergalactic peacekeeping society called the Agents of the Cosmos by using the symbiosis they needed to subsist in order to transform worthy hosts into the ultimate noble warriors. However, to achieve this perfect symbiosis, the host needed to have a perfect blend of moral and physical ideals. If not, the resulting symbiosis would corrupt both the symbiotes and its host. In their desperation to expunge their violent past, the symbiote's hive mind cut off corrupted symbiotes from the hive mind, developing a means of cleansing them and executing those who failed the trial or relapsed into violence. The exiled corrupted symbiotes resumed infecting and overtaking entire planets, spreading what the symbiotes claimed was misinformation about their benevolent counterparts. As a result, despite the Agents of the Cosmos' efforts, the species as a whole redeveloped the reputation of being predatory monsters that dominated their host mentally and physically, while parasitically feeding off their emotions and bodies. Fin Fang Foom was somehow briefly awakened in the 8th century and returned to sleep through a second application of the herb. He consequently entered into Chinese legend, whose name, roughly translated, meant he whose limbs shatter mountains and whose back scrapes the sun. A group of humans were placed as guards outside his tomb, passing the job on to their descendants. The surrounding region became known as the Valley of the Sleeping Dragon. In 730 CE, a young Kunlunian named Li Park became his era's Iron Fist, protecting a Chinese village from invaders and granting them refuge in Kunlun. In 736 CE, Iron Fist and the sorceress Sun teamed up to face Chitarak, an extra-dimensional being hailing from the Crimson Cosmos. Worshipped as a god and a demon by the primitive humans of Earth, Chitarak wanted more worship even now. At some point, perhaps as a result of this battle, Chitarak was banished to his home dimension. In 750 CE, Jabir ibn Hayyan then leader of the Brotherhood of the Shield, conceived of a way to keep the world from ever ending. He built a machine that would take the sum total of the hopes, dreams, inspirations, and desires of 1,000 men and give it to a single man. This man could then recreate the world whenever it was threatened. The machine, however, drained the men of their life forces, and the machine failed. Without 1,000 of the Brotherhood of the Shield around to shape the world, mankind fell into an age of darkness. At this point, the Brotherhood of the Sphere became corrupted. Unknown to all, a species of cold-blooded alien reptiles came to Earth in the time before mankind's ascent. Eager for power and to spread darkness, the aliens branched out to touch upon many paths to their goals, thus first cementing the idea of a many-headed Hydra, undying and malignant. Thanks to the alien reptiles' evil seed, both parts of the greater Brotherhood became corrupted, while the West, the Brotherhood of the Shield, turned inwards and devoured itself. The East flew apart, dissipating itself generations after generations. The Eastern Brotherhood of the Sphere, now simply referred by its enemy, the Shield, as the Beast, spread out, ingraining itself into all facets of human society, science, magic, politics, like a multi-headed Hydra. Sometime in the 9th century, Thor traveled to Earth to promote his worship among the Vikings, both the Norsemen and the Germans, who called him Donner, Thunder, came to worship Thor and other Asgardians. Thor actively encouraged the adulation of his Viking worshippers for years, and also encouraged them to find glory in battle. In 845 CE, Thor led the Viking siege of Paris, where he fought alongside the eternal Circe. In 893 CE, Thor discovered the corpse of a Native American god washed up on the shores of Scandinavia, coming into conflict with the decidal Gorr. Attacked by Gorr, Thor wounded him with a thunderbolt and tracked him to a cave near Lake Ladoga, Russia. Gorr captured Thor and tortured him for 17 days, but Thor's worshippers tracked him down and rescued him, enabling Thor to sever one of Gorr's arms and seemingly kill him. Sometime later, Thor was attacked by black berserkers, minions of Gorr, who dragged him through time to Earth 14412. Enslaved on the black world of Gorr, Thor encountered his goddesses of thunder and attempted to aid their rebellion against Gorr. Rescued by Thor the Avenger, his future self from the 21st century, and All-Father Thor from the distant future, Thor helped them vanquish Gorr and would have claimed Gorr's weapon, the primordial All-Black, for himself, but was stopped by All-Father Thor. In 896 CE, the Norwegian Beowulf became a great warrior by praying to Thor before every single one of his battles, with the god of thunder usually appearing in the flesh to help him fall his enemies. But over time, he became cocky and forgot to pray. With his army routed, his land seized, and his wealth gone, Beowulf resorted to praying once again, but to a different god, Loki. Loki eventually appeared before Beowulf and directed him in a quest for power to rival Thor. Beowulf embarked in a journey to kill a dragon and drink its fiery blood. He drank his blood, becoming a monster. With his newfound power, he battled Thor. After a furious battle that took them across the globe, both warriors returned to Norway. When Loki began to cheer for Beowulf, the Vikings soon attacked the god, unwilling to be a puppet. Thor caught a second wind and punched Beowulf through the earth to the southern pole of the planet. The defeated Viking proceeded to wander the earth, fighting to suppress the monster inside him. Sometime later, Thor was taken to the future again to help his future selves fight against the dark elf warlord Malekith, finally proving himself worthy of Mjolnir in the process. Later, Odin caused Thor to live on Earth in the mortal guises of the Germanic heroes Sigmund and his son Siegfried. In these two roles, Thor played a major role in Odin's efforts to regain the dangerously powerful Ring of the Nibelung. After he was killed, Odin resurrected Thor, but wiped out his memory of his two mortal identities. When Thor discovered that his more zealous Viking worshippers had slaughtered the inhabitants of a Christian monastery, he was shocked and ashamed that they committed atrocities in his name. Thor then withdrew from earthly activities. Around this time, the Celestials visited the Earth for their third host, commanding the Sky Fathers of Earth's pantheons to retreat from mortal worship. After this, the active worship of the gods of Asgard effectively ended. For centuries, the only memory that man would have of the Asgardians would be through myths and legends. In the 9th century, Spain was home to Esteban de Ablo, who studied alchemy before relocating to Transylvania. In 934, or by a different account, 1594 CE, the Hand and the Snakeroot clan affiliated ninja clans evolved from the Sickly Ones, worshipping the beast and learning to resurrect their fallen members as undead assassins. The sword Saki was imbued with human brutality and became their sacred relic, bringing back to life slain clan members, though more cadaverous, with each resurrection. In 987 CE, 7 members of a druid cult made a deal with Mephisto in exchange for immortality, agreeing to funnel souls into his realm. Over the subsequent millennium, the mages acquired great wealth with the plan to take over the world and kill vast members of innocents to pay their debt to Mephisto, eventually becoming the corporation named Mystech. In 1000 CE, the sorcerer Obeng ruled over a kingdom in India. During this time, Dr. Doom, who was time-traveling from the modern age, was searching for a teacher in the arcane arts. Having gained the respect of Doom, Obeng taught Doom his magical secrets. In return, Doom gave Obeng a box of jewels that would enable the mage to buy the help and ingredients that he needed for an immortality elixir. Obeng was very impressed by Doom's time-traveling abilities and never forgot them. As part of his quest for eternal life, Obeng killed the immortal Egyptian wizard Al-Tothas and usurped his form. Gaia and other goddesses sought humans representing mankind's highest ideals to be offered to the Celestials as an offering. Kiana was an Inuit girl in 11th century Alaska. When she was 16 years old, Kiana was chosen by the deities as a member of their sample of humanity and placed in suspended animation, with her superhuman potential awakened. In 1003 CE, the coastal village of Laxstad, Norway, was wiped from the map when Harald Jackelson and his crew murdered the entire population of the town. In the Holoshan Mountains of northern Mongolia, Ensabah Nur heard of a ruler, a feared immortal magician whose magics were such that legions ran in fright. In a confrontation, Nur slew all of Garbha Sien's guards. Garbha Sien then sought to humble his fellow Forever Walker by revealing a secret Titanic alien ship. Having had previous experience with futuristic technology, Nur attacked Garbha Sien and left the other immortal for dead. Not understanding how to kill an immortal, Garbha Sien survived and fled. Nur entered the ship and lived on it for many years, not fully understanding how to communicate with it or control it. Shortly after finding the ship, Nur and his Riders of the Dark were constantly attacked by a young warrior with a sword and shield calling himself the Traveler. After years of sending assassins and battling the Traveler, Nur severed Traveler's left cybernetic arm and, during the confusion, the Traveler pulled a gun and shot him in the head. After reattaching his techno-organic arm, Traveler was accepted as the new leader of the Riders of the Dark, but declined. Traveler turned to Ozymandias, Apocalypse's chronicler, and instructed him to remember that there will always be someone smarter and stronger around, and that being fit to survive means to have the responsibility to help those who are not. Unknown to the Traveler, his techno-organic infected blood mixed with Nur's and resurrected him. Nur could now understand ship, learning it was a celestial transport. Nur was transformed and enhanced by celestial technology, becoming one of the most powerful beings who would ever live, now possessing the ability of total control over the molecular structure of his body. When he learned this, Traveler told Nur that if he was responsible for his immortality, he would make Nur spend eternity far away from there and sent both ship and its passenger far into space. Over the next few centuries, ship sentience slowly evolved, and Nur noticed enslaving it and telling ship that he had created it. After gaining so much power, Nur also began to take long slumbers in ship to refuel his powers. At some point after this, using old hieroglyphs, Nur was telepathically contacted by the celestial Isan, who called Nur Apocalypse and named him the 8th celestial Apocalypse, granting him a death seed and commanding him to become a feared great powerful creature, and shape the destiny of the world. Nur accepted, and Isan stated that one day, maybe in centuries or millennia, the Celestials would come for payments for their gifts. From the previous 7 apocalypses, we only know that the 6th was Kelbitak, apocalypse to the Deviants and Eternals, and the 7th, Gorr's Fill, the Neanderthal apocalypse. In 1013 BCE, Apocalypse was informed by his once enemy Ramatut that certain people would spawn successors who would threaten Apocalypse in the future. Apocalypse went to London to kill Folkburn Logan, ancestor of Wolverine, with his 4 horsemen of Apocalypse: pestilence, phantom bats of the 12 mines, war, famine, and death, but they were all destroyed by Thor. After Apocalypse defeated Thor, the Asgardian blessed his axe Jarnbjorn with his own blood to imbue it with the power to pierce celestial armor, and fended off Apocalypse, saving Folkburn Logan. Shortly after, Loki manipulated a group of Vikings into sailing to Egypt to kill Apocalypse and Clan Akaba. Loki knew Thor would try to save his worshippers, and hopefully die in the process. Thor didn't try, but didn't die, as a female Thor from the future time traveled to the scene and helped Thor Odinson defeat Apocalypse before disappearing just as suddenly as she'd arrived. In 1016 CE, the cyborg alien Tyrese Tarold founded a team of protectors called the Guardians of the Galaxy, along with the Kree Stella Niga, who shared his vision to make the galaxy a safer place. However, their visions came into conflict when Tyrese's sociopathic tendencies surfaced. He and Stella had a falling out, so she reformed the Guardians with new members while Tyrese went on to think bigger. Eventually, he constructed an exodimensional structure existing outside space and time, inside which Tyrese spent an untold number of years implementing his plan to make the galaxy a safer place. He developed a process of gene recruitment, by which captive subjects were converted into hybrids, self-regenerating warriors under his complete control. Tyrese, now calling himself Hermeticus, used the hybrids to launch attacks in various time periods, assimilating entire cultures and civilizations into his host. He also selected certain brilliant individuals to augment his own intelligence, removing their brains and placing them into special chambers in his suit, where they acted as a hive mind. Just as Hermeticus was finally ready to launch his invasion fleet of 80 billion hybrids across time and space, bringing peace to the galaxy through subjugation, he was defeated by the combined efforts of the Guardians of the Galaxy of 1016, the Guardians of the Galaxy of the Modern Age, and the Guardians of the Galaxy of the 30th century. They reversed the process of gene recruitment, turning the hybrids back into their original forms and sending everyone back to their own times, while Tyrese's brain was extracted and kept separate from his body. In 1099 CE, the Spider Society was formed in Spain for the purpose of worshipping totemic spider deities, multiversal supernatural entities created by the elder goddess Neith, linked to the web of life and destiny, a map of the multiverse that enabled travel between realities. Neith's sister, Shathra, became consumed by envy and hatred, and she transformed herself into a wasp-like dark goddess, determined to one day have her spider wasps take revenge on Neith and her spiders, and make her great nest with which to supplant the Great Web. Her influence caused an internal discord among the Spider Society, and eventually some members split into the Sisterhood of the Wasp, culminating in a 1,000-year schism marked by intense conflict, as they grappled over the true essence and embodiment of true power. In 1144 CE, during the Third Crusade, Benet du Paris sought out the legendary Tower of Power, the domain of the mythic Apocalypse in Akaba. After traveling for hours through violent sandstorms, Paris finally collapsed, and a voice spoke to him, asking if he was willing to risk everything to become one of the strong. Paris was then tested, and his mutant powers manifested for the first time. Proving himself strong, Apocalypse teleported Paris on his ship and transformed him into Exodus. After capturing the time-traveling Eternal Circe and the 12th century's Black Knight, who was being possessed by the modern age's Black Knight, Apocalypse commanded Exodus to destroy them. Exodus refused and turned on Nur, calling him a false god. However, Exodus was no match for Nur. He stripped Exodus of his power and sealed him away in a crypt in the Swiss Alps, trapped in a coma-like state. The 12th century saw the rise of the legend of Robin Hood, but his origin is uncertain. According to one legend, he was one of the many beings since the fall of Camelot to be endowed with the Pendragon spirit. At the same time, the Asgardian Fandral was wandering the area and performing most of the feats assigned to the legend. Fandral bumped into the archer Hawkeye from the modern age, who was traveling through time and also performed archery feats, which might have inspired the legend. Hawkeye was not the only time traveler there, as Thomas Time of the 20th century was also in the time period performing archery feats. In 1145 CE, an evil monk named Ælfric gathered the Darkhold scrolls, but he was burned at the stake, leaving them to the Catholic Church. Paolo Montesi became their curator and translator. Paolo learned of something called the Malachi prophecy, which told of the tenure of each pope for nearly the next 1,000 years. With this information, Pope Eugene III declared that the scrolls and everything related to the Darkhold would be compiled into one book entrusted to Paolo and his family. The Pope allowed Paolo a special dispensation to marry so Paolo's descendants would safeguard the book. After birthing a son, Giacomo, Paolo was killed by Varney, who had hoped to keep the church from using the book to wipe out all vampires. For the next 8 centuries, the Montesi family dedicated themselves to destroying vampires. Around 1191 CE, King Richard the Lion-Hearted of England was active in the region along with his supporter Crusader and the traitorous knight Guy de Montfort, where they clashed repeatedly with the forces of the Saladin of Egypt. Bridget O'Hare was born in 12th century Ireland. When she was 17 years old, Bridget was chosen as a member of the Sample of Humanity and placed in suspended animation with her superhuman potential awakened. 800 years ago, the Hand fought the oppressive system of feudal Japan, but they fell to corruption and darkness when they were corrupted by the Snakeroot clan. In 1211 CE, Dr. Doom traveled back in time from the modern age and became involved in a romantic relationship with Morgan Le Fay in exchange for her tutelage in the mystic arts. Morgan was astral projecting from her physical prison in Otherworld. That year, as China was being invaded by Genghis Khan, China was visited by the 20th century time traveler Tommy Time. Tommy prevented Khan from obtaining the crown of Confucius, which would have made the warlord the undisputed ruler of China. Bei Ming Qian was the Iron Fist circa 1227 CE. When the Mongol army invaded his village, which was close to Kunlun Mountains, he protected villagers from the invaders and slayed Genghis Khan himself in battle. In 1245 CE, the powerful Gorr, the black sorcerer, was living in France. However, Gorr was banished by his peers and found himself exiled to the Savage Land, where he lived for centuries. In the 14th century, the Asgardians brought Geoffrey Chaucer to Asgard, and he taught them English. For whatever reason, Volstagg didn't partake in the lessons. In 1313 CE, a noble knight named Captain Amerigo had a young boy called Bucky as his squire. They were the reincarnations of Hercules and Bucca from 3000 BCE and fought Diablo Natas, a reincarnation of their past incarnation's enemy. With his dying words, Natas predicted that the next incarnation of Hercules would be called Captain America. From 1346 to 1353 CE, the Black Plague swept over Europe. Many unrelated origins have been given as explanations for the Black Plague. The real-world bubonic plague, a primal scream originated from a cosmic being, or a portion from the European Sorcerers Guild, which was thrown at them by the anthropomorphic cat people, cats who had been magically evolved by the guild, and subsequently persecuted. In 1347 CE, Wales villagers accused Dafydd ap Andras of causing the plague because he had been exposed as a mutant since birth. This type of early manifestation of powers was later classified as killcrops, a genetic predecessor to the modern-age mutant who delay the onset of their powers as an evolutionary trait to survive and proliferate. A population of 300 proto-mutants with a less evolved X gene lived in mountains of Crimea. Due to the Black Plague not affecting them, humans hunted them down and buried them in a mass grave. In 1350 CE, the Catholic Church made contact with the mystic city of Camartage, opening up communication. But alas, this led to the reawakening of Varney the vampire, who came to Camartage and manipulated Kalu, an old villager, sorcerer, and protector of the city. Kalu's apprentice, the young Yao, wanted to continue to use his magic to help the village, but Kalu wanted to build a vast empire and organize the men of Camartage into an army by magically controlling their minds. Kalu began his conquests, and the youth called upon mystical forces while in his paralytic state, ultimately banishing Kalu to the Crimson Cosmos. Kalu had taught Yao the secrets of immortality, but his spell revoked said immortality from Camartage, so Yao sought the cup of eternity and thus began aging at a greatly slowed rate. Albert Destiny, part of a clan of half-genies, stretched his healing powers to the limits in an attempt to stem the disease and spare the lives of its victims. This act caused him great suffering. The Enelux, an inhuman tribe, were instrumental in ensuring that mankind survived the Black Plague. The cat people, guilty over their role in the release of the plague, successfully found a cure as well. A young Yao stole a map from the Knights of Never and magically imprinted it on his arm. He tried to escape their fortress but was eventually caught, beaten, and imprisoned. His punishment for stealing the map was to rot in prison. However, the wizard Merlin appeared and rescued the boy. He recruited the young mystic to join other sorcerers supreme throughout time to defeat the Forgotten, dozens of humans with magical leanings Merlin had imprisoned after they were drawn to an ancient tome believed to be the Word of God. Due to the corrupted sigils adjoining their cells, the humans combined into one revenge entity and got loose. Merlin assembled a team of sorcerer supremes from throughout time to stop his shameful mistake. Still young, Yao decided to seek out an order of ancient magic users known as the Ancient Ones to devote his entire life to their goal of combating evil sorcerers. The youth eventually became even more skilled than his colleagues, and he grew in power, his power becoming indeed so great that he was the first mortal of Earth to meet with Eternity, the sentient embodiment of the universe, who presented him with the amulet of Agamotto and charged him to become the Earth Dimension's Sorcerer Supreme. In his travels, the Ancient One collected mystical artifacts from across the globe. In 1367 CE, Yellowclaw sought out the aid of the Ancient One, who assisted in bringing the dragon known as Mr. Lao to the Claw's organization. Lao was a longtime advisor of the Khan Empire. While traveling on a ship to the west, the Ancient One stopped a siren who was singing to draw sailors to their deaths. He transformed her into a complete being, making her soul as beautiful as her physical form. Horrified at the destruction wrought by her actions, she forbade herself from speaking, later taking on the name Venus. In 1381 CE, peasants in England revolted against high taxes and oppression, aided by the Eternity Mask, which had passed down from the days of Camelot and gave the wearer equal power to whomever they may face. In the 15th century, Yao, the Ancient One, took on his first pupil, a young man seeking knowledge who studied under him for many years until he was caught practicing a black rite. He banished him, but allowed him to live. That student became a monstrous sorcerer known as Mr. Jip. Later, the Ancient One faced off against the sorceress Morwen, which resulted in her being banished from existence, leaving her soul trapped between dimensions. When a cult worshipping the ancient Atlantean tyrant Sumaket kidnapped the Wakandan mystical teacher Zawari and other mystical artifacts to free Sumaket from his exile dimension, Zawari's pupil Ea Nahanda, the renegade panther, joined Thor, Grizzly Rider, Viking leader Bodolf the Black, the Atlantean Iron Fist Gale, Theodosia Zidardos, wielder of the Phoenix Force, and Mirkfoot, the Sasquatch sorcerer supreme, to avenge these deaths, becoming the Avengers. They barred Sumaket's entry and found him a new prison. Thor battled Apocalypse again with his Avengers when Mephisto convinced Apocalypse that the false gods mocked him and needed to perish. In 1407 CE, Thor's Avengers faced Mephisto in a dinosaur form until a star brand from the future defeated him for them. Circa mid-15th century, Japan descended into a century of civil war. During that period, the immortal warrior Black Axe participated in many of the battles and opposed the Hand. Believing they could serve the beast better, one faction of the Hand split as a separate cult, the True Believers, and relocated to Korea. They forged a blood feud with the Hand, which still endures in modern days. In the 15th century, Vlad Tepes Dracula, prince of the small European kingdom of Wallachia, joined the Order of the Dragon, a militant order of Catholic knights. In 1444 CE, Dracula's father was killed and he claimed the title of Voivode of Wallachia at the age of 18. His reign lasted only a year before he was forced to flee the principality, fearing his father's killers. In 1451 CE, Dracula returned to his country and threw himself at the mercy of its new rulers, who took him under their wing to gain legitimacy for their regency. Dracula learned the art of war and sired a daughter, Lilith. Dracula eventually recovered the throne and ordered everyone associated with his father's death impaled, launching a massive assault on Turkey. In 1459 CE, he sired a son, Vlad. Varney, the first vampire, saw potential in the young despot, and misled him with visions so that he'd be wounded in combat. Dracula was defeated in battle when facing Apocalypse and his band of Dark Riders. Dracula was taken to the Romani Leanda for healing. Instead, Leanda, who was secretly a vampire, vampirized Dracula. After proving himself worthy of taking Varney's title as the true vampire lord, Varney imparted much of his supernatural power to Dracula by forcing him to drink his blood, turning him into the new Lord of Vampires. With his job complete, Varney sealed Dracula in a coffin and committed suicide by exposing himself to direct sunlight. Dracula waged a bloody war against the Romani as revenge for Leanda's actions. One of those who he killed was the son of the witch Gretchen, who was unknown to Dracula, caring for his exiled daughter Lilith. Gretchen cursed Lilith to become a vampire who would hunt Dracula until he was destroyed forever. Later, Dracula reclaimed Castle Dracula from its new occupant, the vampire Bordia. It was during this conflict that he first learned of the Darkhold, which held a Montesi formula capable of destroying vampires. Dracula sent the thief Murgo to retrieve the tome from the Vatican, but the thief was slain and the book stolen by the sorcerer Cagliostro, beginning a centuries-long feud with Dracula. Following an assassination attempt in 1471 CE, Dracula abdicated the throne, but remained at Castle Dracula for over a century after. During that time, he was forced to confront and kill his son, Vlad Tepes, who had been raised by Romani people and taught to hate him. In 1480 CE, in the town of Zolnys, Harbin Zemo, the granary chargeman and ministerials of Zolnys, stood alone and slaughtered an invading horde of Slav raiders with an armor he borrowed from others. Impressed with his courage, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire chose to elevate this town administrator, who was little more than a peasant himself, to the status of Baron of Zolnys and the outer lying areas. Harbin was hailed as a hero by the townsfolk. He vowed that whenever good men and women were threatened, he and his kin would be there to serve the cause of justice. However, as the years passed, Harbin was corrupted by the power he now had over the townspeople and the responsibilities that came with it. He became cruel to the serfs who worked his land and would kill those who did not show him the reverence he felt he deserved as their hero. Hadamar Zemo was the second baron in the Zemo barony. Hadamar was greedy and eagerly awaited his father's death. Soon after Harbin's death, Hadamar's 12-year-old son Heller started a coup and had Hadamar slain by his guards at his inauguration. Michelangelo Buonarroti was born in 1475 CE in Italy. He grew up to become one of the greatest artists of the Renaissance. Best known for his sculptures and frescoes, he was brilliant and talented in many ways. He could paint, sculpt, design buildings, and write poetry. However, 2 years after becoming a man, infinity washed over him and he began to simultaneously exist at all times. Michelangelo stopped existing as a linear being and was illuminated as the Forever Man. Over time, many mutants who shared the trait of immortality joined a brotherhood named the Externals, and set to manipulate the world. In 1492 CE, the external Gideon accompanied Christopher Columbus on his historic expedition that led to the discovery of the Americas. In 1495 CE, Leonardo da Vinci and the Brotherhood of the Shield discovered clues of the celestial gestating in the sun, draining its energy. They began planning a trip there. In 1496 CE, Dracula was approached by emissaries of Bologna, Spain, and Prussia, requesting that he remain out of their respective countries. This only irritated Dracula, and after slaughtering the emissaries, he began his first tour of Greater Europe. Though he eventually returned to Transylvania, he was pursued by a man known only as Hans, who sought vengeance against the vampire. Suffering from frostbite, Hans was nursed back to health by Rachel Van Helsing, and the two became lovers. When Hans recovered enough to fight Dracula and was subsequently killed, Rachel, pregnant with Hans' child, vowed that her line would oppose Dracula until the monster was finally destroyed. From the 15th century, the Catholic Church was heavily influenced by the Borgia family, who became prominent in ecclesiastical and political affairs. The family producing two popes, Pope Calixtus III and Pope Alexander VI. One of the worst of the family was Lucrezia Borgia. In the 16th century, the European Catholic Order of the Dragon went underground and focused on supernatural enemies. They stopped fighting for the crown and began fighting for all humanity. Their activities in the 16th century were mostly focused on an unrecorded event known as the Vampire Wars. Lucy Keogh was a pirate captain known as Red Lucy, an ancestor of the modern age's Scarlet Witch. After retiring from piracy to raise her children and enjoy a life as a gentlewoman, her crew would go on to find a new captain, the fearsome Blackbeard. In reality, Blackbeard was the Thing from the modern age's Fantastic Four, who gave birth to the legend while time traveling. During this century, Dracula battled Puritan adventurer Solomon Kane. Kane escaped with his life, but soon returned, feeling guilty for leaving Dracula alive. Kane just barely managed to defeat Dracula, staking him with a sharpened ornate cross. It was only a few hours, however, before a hungry band of travelers arrived at Castle Dracula, reviving him when one took the valuable cross from Dracula's seemingly ancient skeleton. At one point, a man named Durenye managed to steal Dracula's diary, which revealed several of his weaknesses and would eventually become one of the sources adapted by writer Bram Stoker into the novel Dracula. Before Leonardo da Vinci left to investigate the sun, he tried to recruit Michelangelo several times, and Michelangelo revealed his nature as an omnitemporal being in 1502 CE. Michelangelo gave Leonardo the human machine, an evolving device that explored and realized the full potential of man, and a small piece of his power, telling him that Leonardo must help save the world. Leonardo built a base for the Brotherhood of the Shield under Rome, calling it the Immortal City. Finally, Leonardo completed a flying suit that could travel through space and time in 1503 CE. With the human machine in hand, he took off to the future. Furthermore, he invented a perfect mechanical decoy to take his own place. It had all his memories and would continue his life as if he had never left. After a woman from Kunlun had a tryst with a Western man during a pilgrimage, she birthed a girl named Fengji Wu. Her mother seemed to experience some shame from this and raised her daughter largely in the margins of society, so her unusual red hair and selective mutism would draw little notice. But Fengji's quiet life was shattered when Kunlun's ruler, the Yuti, began to see her in prophetic dreams that showed her being fought over by a giant fiery bird and dragon before absorbing the energy of both. The Yuti found Fengji after searching the entire city for a girl with her features and ordered her to be trained as the next Iron Fist, despite her lack of experience in martial arts. The Yuti recognized the fiery dragon of his dreams as the representation of the power the Iron Fist wielded after defeating the dragon Xiaolo, but knew little about the bird of fire aside from its potential to devastate the earth, while Fengji trained with the immortal martial arts master Li Kong. He sent for the help of Leonardo da Vinci, who arrived in the form of his life model decoy instead. Da Vinci arrived in Kunlun just in time to see an exhausted and resentful Fengji manifest some of the Phoenix's energy. Correctly deducing that this meant the Phoenix Force was fast approaching Earth, Da Vinci set up a powerful telescope to keep a close watch on it. Despite having virtually no training, the time came for Fengji to battle the dragon Xiaolo for the power of the Iron Fist. She managed to do it, and even began to speak for the first time, but Da Vinci announced the Phoenix Force was on its way, which would prove to be a far more perilous trial. With only a few minutes left before the cosmic entity reached Kunlun, the UT finally told Fengji the most important part of its prophetic dreams. They showed that either she would stay in control of herself and master the Phoenix Force, or that she would succumb to the incredible power and devastate her world like so many Dark Phoenix hosts before her. As the Force approached, Fengji manifested the fiery dragon the UT had seen in his dreams, and the two fought fiercely before being absorbed by Fengji's body, just as he had foreseen. The young girl now wore a combination of the Iron Fist and Phoenix forces. Fengji managed to speak with the others as herself for a bit, but her control faltered for a second and nearly became a Dark Phoenix. After an internal struggle where she seemed to communicate with the Force directly, she mysteriously said, "The world isn't ready." Bidding them a fond farewell, she flew into the night sky, never to appear or be seen again. The next Iron Fist became a woman named Wu Aoshi, circa 1545 CE. During her training, she fell in love and became betrothed to a fisherman who became distraught at the violence destined for the Iron Fist and left her and Kunlun once the city merged with Earth. Wu followed shortly after to search for her love. During her travels, Wu made a living as a mercenary and took on a job to liberate Pinghai Bay from the Wokou pirates, but was defeated and imprisoned. Wu was rescued by her beloved and killed the pirates by infusing her chi into an arrow, turning it into an explosive projectile. Wu and the fisherman spent their remaining years together in the liberated territory, with Wu later becoming known as the Pirate Queen of Pinghai Bay. Herbert was the fourth Baron Zemo and expanded Zemo Keep's control of trade and commerce with his armies. He nearly incited a holy war with the papacy. In 1556 CE, he fought alongside Helmut Zemo, his time-displaced distant descendant. Herbert was eventually assassinated by his own generals, who feared the reprisals of all the enemies who had united against him. Because his two eldest sons died young, he was succeeded by his youngest son, Helmut, who was a ruthless ruler who destroyed everyone who disagreed with him or opposed him. In 1568 CE, Sir Francis Drake led an expedition to the Caribbean. When the ship's surgeon, Zachariah Ravenscraft, was injured by the natives, Drake found a native healer named Dagu to treat him. Instead of healing Ravenscraft, though who was plainly dying, Dagu used an eldritch spell to trap him between life and death. Ravenscraft became a sort of vampire, powerful and immortal, but always hungry. In 1575 CE in Kyushu, Kaganobu Yoshioka killed a foreigner threatening his mother. The blame went to her, and Kaganobu was taken in the custody of Saburo Ishiyama, who trained him in the ways of the samurai at the Ishiyama school. Galactus first visited Earth in 1582 CE, landing on Rome with an unidentified herald, Michelangelo Galileo Galilei, and the Brotherhood of the Shield focused the power of the Brotherhood into a single man using a device that could recreate the Earth and fended off Galactus at the cost of 2/3 of the Brotherhood. The success was a renaissance, the true beginning of the Age of Reason. In 1584 CE, Solomon Kane took part in the Serpent War when he teamed up across time and space with several heroes from different eras, Conan of the Hyborian Age and Dark Agnes and Moon Knight of the Modern Age, to battle Set. This was set in motion by Set's rival Elder God, the Worm, but the heroes defeated it as well. That year, Kaganobu Yoshioka graduated from Ishiyama School. A masterless samurai, Kaganobu served Japan, opposing corruption and injustice for 3 years. At Saburo Ishiyama, death, he returned to the school to lead it in 1588 CE, offering a role of co-leader to his former rival, Daisuke Sasaki. Learning that the daimyos implemented regulations to the schools, Kaganobu decided to send messengers to other like-minded schools and form a secret society opposing the government. It was the resurgence of the Hand. The inner circle of Kaganobu's organizations were formed of himself, Sasaki, and 5 others, so-called heathens and heretics, who could be the 5 of legend of the Hand. In autumn, he attacked a foreigner ship in Kyushu, slaughtering the whole crew. The organization's symbol, a bloody handprint, soon struck terror into any Japanese dealing with foreigners. In summer 1590 CE, the inner circle of the Hand gathered at the Ishiyama school. Kaganobu later accepted Eliza Martinez, a half-breed Japanese girl, to join the school, using her father to gather information but growing feelings for her. In 1591 CE, the first English colony was settled on Roanoke Island. It did not survive, as it was attacked by a vampire who turned all the 121 settlers into vampires, leaving only one message carved into a tree: Croatoan. In autumn 1592 CE, Eliza Martinez was accepted among the Hand and in Kaganobu's bed. Soon, the Hand grew so large that it became hard to control it. Communication between the sects broke off. Hand agents selling their skill as mercenaries and committing crimes against Japanese, spreading rumors or dissension. Eliza's impure lineage was leaked to some. In 1594 CE, Hand members tried to kill Eliza, seeing her as a disease, infecting the Hand and corrupting Kaganobu. Kaganobu confronted Sasaki, killed his rival, and soon confronted the inner circle. Despite killing many members, the duo was defeated and ended their lives rather than be killed by their enemies. The remaining inner circle members then brought them back to life as the Hand's deadly weapons, sacrificing low-ranking members to resurrect them. Upon those actions, the Hand firmly joined the Beast as a ninja assassin guild, both pursuing its dark agendas and serving as mercenaries to those who could afford their services. In the 17th century, the Order of the Dragon opposed a zombie plague. Ogun, believed to be a mutant, was, according to some reports, alive in the early part of the 17th century. Far beyond Earth, the Omlux droid forms fought and won the Apparatus Rebellion, gaining emancipation from their organic creators. Despite their autonomy, the droid forms clung to concepts of preservation and service, and they became their religion. Droid form ministries went on to maintain the relics and ruins of other cultures throughout the lesser fringes. They wouldn't need to know or care what these relics meant to the cultures that made them. Their gospel was simply to protect that which was once significant with dedication, devotion, and violence if necessary. As English settlers sailed to the New World of America, among them was a member of Clan Akaba, Apocalypse's descendants. Another ship was swept in a whirlpool that was also a portal into the negative zone. The crew spent the following centuries fighting the zone's ruler, Annihilus, whom they viewed as the literal biblical devil. Also present was the Eternity Mask, which traveled on the Mayflower, embedding itself in the fabric of American history. In 1602 CE, Stephen Rogers from a possible future was inadvertently sent back in time to this time, causing ripples in the time stream that caused the birth of many modern-age heroes in this time, and threatened the very fabric of reality. Uatu the Watcher revealed the nature of the problem to the Elizabethan-era version of Stephen Strange, who helped send the temporarily displaced Captain America back through a time portal, correcting the timeline. Uatu's superior allowed the divergent timeline, Earth 311, to persist in a pocket dimension. During the Edo period, the ghost Ronin would walk around Japan, hunting down those who had sinned. One day, he was attacked by Mephisto and his army, and Ghost Ronin faced them with the Avengers of the modern age. During the 17th century, Kang the Conqueror was the main sponsor for William Shakespeare's plays, with the small condition of getting to take up a role when the feeling strikes him. In 1612, Kang asked the bard to play the role of Prospero in The Tempest. In 1625 CE, in a search for greater knowledge, Isaac Newton traveled to Ashomia, the deviant city where he was captured. The deviant ruler found his DNA interesting and forced him to mate with a deviant woman named Morta. He lived among the deviants until he could steal the secret knowledge contained in their holy book, claiming it for the Brotherhood of the Shield. Afterwards, he burned the city down and escaped. 1630 CE, Morta gave birth to Newton's half-deviant son, Leonid. The enraged deviant killed her, but Michelangelo appeared to save the baby. He took Leonid to the parallel dimension he called the Sinkhole, where Leonid's cosmic powers transformed a pigeon and gave it a humanoid form. The pigeon, christened Mina, would raise Leonid. In 1640 CE, Helmuth Zemo was assassinated with a dagger by the time-displaced Helmut Zemo, his distant descendant. Hackett Zemo tried to avenge his father and kill Helmut, unsuccessfully. Hackett sired Hartwig, who sired Hilliard. As a young man, Hilliard Zemo was in love with a Jewish girl named Elsbeth Kleinenschwitz. Elsbeth's family had been merchants who had served the Zemo barony since its inception. When Hilliard's father, Hartwig, died, the barony passed to him. Hilliard's advisors feared the Kleinenschwitz family was growing too wealthy and too powerful and were a threat to the barony. Hilliard urged Elsbeth to flee the country, but she refused. Hilliard's men slaughtered the Kleinenschwitz family, save for a pregnant Elsbeth who was saved by a time-traveling Helmut Zemo. Hilliard never knew that Elsbeth survived and had his child. Hilliard later married an Austrian girl named Gretchen and fathered Hoffmann Zemo. Newton later discovered the elixir of life. Immortality gave Isaac clarity of thought, and he determined that the world would end in 2060 CE. Turned fatalistic, Newton murdered Galileo and supplanted him as the new patriarch of the Shield in 1642 CE, while Michelangelo disapprovingly watched. Newton prepared to attack Michelangelo, but he teleported away. During the British Civil War, the Eternity Mask took a role in shaping its events. In 1645 CE, Michelangelo approached Nostradamus and informed him he would be needed to save the world in 3 centuries, so he had to let himself be imprisoned by Newton, as he wouldn't age with Newton's infinity formula, an inferior version of the elixir of life. Newton captured Nostradamus, using him as a seer and forcing him to reveal prophecies of the future. Newton continued seeking out knowledge in the mystic arts, hoping to discover an escape from the predestination of mathematical formulas. Newton's powers and knowledge eventually became so great that he was named the Sorcerer Supreme. In the 1600s, New Amsterdam was settled by Dutch immigrants. These immigrants were greeted by time traveler Wolf Turber, a robot from the future of Earth 36292, who sought to conquer the Earth. He attempted to subvert the Dutch immigrants in 1649 CE to his cause, but they saw through his duplicity and chased him away. For a time, Dracula ruled over a Spanish province, but was driven out following the first of many encounters with Janus, another son of his he had with an angel. In 1661 CE, Dracula grew tired of his wanton brides and sought out a more reserved bride. He settled on an American woman, Charity Brown of Salem, Massachusetts. Before he could arrive to claim her, however, she was framed for witchcraft and publicly executed. In retribution, Dracula manipulated the slave Tituba into setting into motion the infamous Salem witch trials. Several heroes from the modern age, including Spider-Man, were transported to the time of the trials by the time-traveling Dark Rider, but were unable to stop him in time to prevent the hanging of the trial's victims. In 1666 CE, Dormammu, a faultine, extra-dimensional energy being born from pure magic, sought to conquer Earth using the Great Fire of London to fuel his dark magic. By draining the life force of the victims, he planned to open a portal at Stonehenge that would link Earth to his dark dimension. However, his scheme was foiled when the Sorcerer Supreme Yao confronted him. With his mastery of mystic arts, Yao used powerful spells to force Dormammu back into his dimension, preventing the merger of the two worlds and thwarting the Dark Entity's ambitions. In the territory that would later be named Westchester County, New York, and would later host the Ravencroft Institute for the Criminally Insane, the first holding facility built was a single wooden cell constructed in 1664 CE to house Cortland Cassidy, a settler who had been driven insane by a local cult and become a murderous cannibal. Cortland escaped, murdering his wife Molly. The cult in question was a cannibal cult that worshipped Null since the 15th century. In the 1670s, Dracula found himself without sustenance in rural Switzerland, kept from human prey by the rural farmers' extensive anti-vampiric defenses. Forced to make do with cow's blood, Dracula inadvertently created the bizarre Hellcow. The hellish heifer would spend 3 centuries trailing Dracula. New Amsterdam would remain a Dutch possession until 1674 CE, when it came under control of the English and renamed New York, named for the Duke of York, later King James II of England. Alongside its construction, a structurally identical cityscape matching it was located deep within the earth directly under it, called Under York City. In 1687 CE, after publishing his outline of universal gravitation and the laws of motion, Isaac Newton began to murder his intellectual rivals, whom he despised, one by one. In 1692 CE, Hiram Shaw was Earth Sorcerer Supreme and the Reverend of Salem, Massachusetts, having taken the position after the previous Reverend was banished for witchcraft during the Salem witch trials. Shaw disapproved of his son, Obadiah Shaw's relationship with Abigail Harkness, whom he believed to be a witch. One night, Dormammu summoned Shaw, warning him that his lust for power would doom his family. The dark entity offered protection in exchange for Shaw's submission, but Shaw refused. Upon returning home, Shaw found his wife dead and blamed Abigail, having her arrested for witchcraft and murder. Abigail was sentenced to death, but Obadiah freed her, and they fled Salem. Shaw sent a mob after them, only for Abigail to reveal she had powers and kill the townsfolk with a blast of fire, leaving only Shaw alive to face the consequences. In the 18th century, Mephisto encountered the sea captain Jules Van Straten and corrupted his soul, causing him to be consumed by greed. He sent his ship and crew into a storm, killing them all. Mephisto claimed the captain's soul, cursing him to sail the 7 seas forever as the legendary Flying Dutchman. In the early 18th century, Dormammu sought to invade the earthly realm once again, but was confronted by the latest Sorcerer Supreme, Isaac Newton. Renowned for his scientific genius, Newton was also a master of the mystic arts. Combining arcane knowledge with mathematical precision, he successfully repelled Dormammu, preventing yet another incursion into the earthly realm. In the 1730s, a cat massacre was performed in Paris as a way of summoning a Senelin, the magical embodiment of envy, hate, and the need to punish. Once summoned, the Senelin roamed Paris for decades. The cat massacre in itself was the first ember of the French Revolution. During the Revolution, the external Burke was guillotined. Hercules had an affair with Marie Antoinette, and the clan Akaba officiated as executioners. Benjamin Franklin taught Volstagg how to speak English, leaving him with a dialect more modern than all of his fellow Asgardians. As his parting gift, on June 15, 1752, Volstagg gave Franklin a kite with a key and led him to perform the kite experiment that proved lightning was electrical. In 1754 CE, Hartwig Zemo pledged his army to the service of the Imperial Diet. He battled during the 7 Years' War and was killed during the conflict. More of his men were killed in the war than any other nobleman's armies in Germany. The American Revolutionary War and independence in 1776 CE was caused by the externals. When the Captain America of the modern age transported back in time and met Benjamin Franklin, he designed the American flag after Captain America's uniform. One of Captain America's ancestors was a Revolutionary soldier who acted as the costumed Captain America of his era. He fought alongside Wallace Worthington. While set to meet with Wallace, Captain America I found their house ablaze. He rescued a dying Wallace and his wife Elizabeth Shaw, learning the Hellfire Club was responsible, a social club for the British social elite and wealthy who wanted to ensure Britain's victory. The Black Knight of the era served in the British Army in the colonies. When William Lumpkin, a mailman from the modern age, arrived in the past, his appearance distracted George Washington and led to him being captured by British troops. This threatened to alter history, but the official record was preserved when the modern age's Fantastic Four traveled back in time and helped free Washington. Around the same time, the Moon Knight of the era fought against Kang the Conqueror in the city of Boston when he came to the past looking for the magical artifacts of Moon Knight's god, Khonshu. Also present was the Eternity Mask, In the American colonies, the mask found its way into the hands of Benjamin Franklin. Recognizing its extraordinary properties, Franklin harnessed its magical energies to aid in the fight for independence. On July 2nd, the Continental Congress formally voted for independence and issued its declaration on July 4th. A group of Skrull subversives came to the planet Earth. A Skrull spy was sent to pose as Thomas Jefferson to ensure passages about slavery remained in the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. The intent was that if the human race was accustomed to slavery, then it would be easier for the Skrulls to enslave them. However, this plan was thwarted by the Fantastic Four, who traveled back in time and used hypnosis to make them believe they were cows. In 1782 CE, the immortal prophet Tiresias, a gender-fluid human nymph hybrid originating from ancient Greece, crashed at Mozart's place during the time de Entrefront à un Serral had just opened with rave reviews. She enjoyed his many parties. In 1783 CE, one of the final battles of the war took place on the land that would one day be the Ravencroft Institute for the Mentally Insane. It was during the battle that the original Captain America was killed. In 1788, Victor Frankenstein created the Frankenstein's monster. In 1789 CE, the Vatican ordered the arrest of Alessandro di Cagliostro on the grounds that Freemasonry was a heresy, and he was imprisoned in the castle of San Leo near Montefeltro. He was reputed to have died in 1795 CE in a cell in Italy's Papal States, but in reality, Cagliostro had at some point left to continue his unending quest for occult power. In 1776, a Hessian trooper soldier was killed by an American cannonball. In 1801 CE, he would rise as the latest wielder of the spirit of vengeance, giving rise to the legend of the Headless Horseman. In the late 18th century, Jonas Graymalkin was born. At the age of 16, he realized he was gay. Meeting another boy in his family's barn one day, he was discovered by his father, a religious man, who believed his son to be an abomination, a spawn of the devil. Beating Jonas nearly to death, his father then sought to bury him alive in the nearby woods. This burial triggered his mutant powers, allowing him to survive some 200 years underground before being unearthed in the modern age. During the Qing dynasty, Fin Fang Foom attacked the city of Tianjin, but was stopped by sorcerer Zhang Zhu, also known as Fu Manchu, and his 5 Weapons Society. Zhu, his brother, and their 5 disciples, the Deadly Warriors, formed the society to protect China. The structure and naming system of the 5 Weapons Society was inspired by the legend of Ta Lo's 5 sets of heavenly weapons, which consisted of the 1 hammer, 2 swords, saber, 3 staffs, staff, 9 daggers, dagger, and 10 rings, hand. In space, a fleet of Galadorian starships entered the so-called Dark Nebula and were destroyed by the Dire Wraiths. A Dire Wraith war fleet soon prepared to invade Galador itself. The Prime Director of Galador asked the general populace of the planet for volunteers to give up their humanoid bodies and undergo surgical conversion into an army of cyborg warriors called Spaceknights, who would be adapted for the rigors of combat in outer space. The first to volunteer was a man named Rom, who became the greatest and most heroic of the Space Knights. Millions volunteered, but only a few hundred were accepted and underwent surgery in which much of their bodies, including their brains, were transplanted into a computerized exoskeleton onto which their autonomic and central nervous systems were grafted. Those portions of the subject's bodies which were not used in the conversion process were cryogenically preserved on Galador in the halls of science. The Galadorians intended to restore the Space Knights to their original humanoid forms once the war with the Dire Wraiths was over. In the major confrontation that ensued, the Space Knights destroyed the bulk of the Dire Wraiths' fleet and their monstrous creature, Deathwing. Large numbers of Wraiths escaped the battle, however, and Wraith strongholds existed in other parts of the universe. Hence, Rom and the other Space Knights left Galador to stalk Dire Wraiths throughout the universe, and did so for over 200 Earth years. In 1833 CE, Ichisumi was the daughter of a proud samurai and constantly disappointed her father in her occupation of a geisha by never getting chosen by any wealthy men. This led to Ichisumi later suffering from an acute inferiority complex upon the manifestation of her mutant power, which allowed her to control insects. She had her Yume beetles attack all of the other geisha she believed to be prettier. The beetles went through hundreds of women until they returned to her. When they did, she was unaware, or did not care, that she would mentally link with them, and the mutilation of the beetles drove her mad. Ichisumi was watched by Apocalypse and selected as one of his final horsemen contingency plan. Taking the name Ahab in the 1840s, Ulysses Bloodstone became the captain of the Pequod, and he fought against Giganto, an Atlantean beast. In 1849 CE, wealthy rancher Cal Brunder tried to pressure other cattle ranchers into selling their lands, accusing them of false crimes if necessary. In response, Jim Gardley taught himself shooting, befriended the horse Lightning, and took on the identity of a masked raider, vowing to fight evil and lawlessness wherever he found it. His mask was the legendary Eternity Mask, which made him equal to his opponent. A powerful being called Shan Ka'ang was trying to hide from the deadly Karaga from her own universe and found a passageway to Earth 616. However, she passed only partially to that universe and became part of planet Earth, fitting between the pre-existing nations of Southeast Asia. She camouflaged herself for fear of attracting the Karaga and mimicked the other country's geography and culture, becoming the country Sinkong, including becoming a protectorate of France. In 1859 CE, Dr. Nathaniel Essex was a brilliant Victorian-era scientist who was obsessed with deterministic interpretations of natural evolution, predicting the emergence of mutants in the near future. After Nathaniel's son passed away at age 4 from birth defects, he hired the gang, known as the Marauders, to collect all types of misshapen folk off the streets of London to be victims of Nathaniel's experiments. The Marauders unexpectedly awoke Apocalypse, who ordered them to take him to their employer. While digging up his own dead son to experiment on, Nathaniel was approached by Apocalypse, who claimed to be interested in his work. Nathaniel learned that his wife Rebecca, who was pregnant with a second child, had freed all of his captives, prematurely had their baby, and was dying of the strain. Denying him forgiveness as she died in disgust, Rebecca stated Nathaniel was utterly and contemptibly sinister. Crushed, Essex agreed to become Apocalypse's prelate, and was painfully transformed with celestial technology into an immortal being known as Mr. Sinister. After realizing that Apocalypse's cruelty had no purpose, and declaring that was ignorance, and ignorance was the greatest enemy of science, Sinister betrayed the mutant, infecting him with a deadly plague and sending him into hibernation again. The Iron Fist of the year 1860 CE, Bei Bong Wen, assisted the Chinese against the British and French forces during the Second Opium War. Despite taking down tens of thousands of enemy soldiers at the Taku forts, Bei and his Chinese allies were defeated, and Bei was taken prisoner. This spiritual defeat made Bei unable to use his powers, and his befriending fellow captive and mythical warrior Vivatma Visvajit. Vivatma had a similar tale to tell, one in which he too was cut off from his power source but knew of a way to get it back if they visited Vivatma's exiled poet king. The two escaped from prison and journeyed to Burma, making it to the palace of Vivatma's exiled poet king. The two warriors made their way inside, only to find they were led into a trap. The poet king was long dead, and his killer was waiting to feast on the energy both men had to offer. The woman called Tiger Jani attacked, but with the loss of his king and the loss of the shame he felt within, Vivatma's powers returned to him. Inspired, Bei's powers returned as well, and the two defeated Tiger Jani. A physically and mentally worn Bei returned home to K'un-Lun, relinquishing his powers so that the cycle of the Iron Fist could begin again. He took a wife who bore him 13 sons. In 1860, during the Second Opium War, the British and French forces united against China. However, the Five-Weapon Society stood against the British Army. In a battle in Shanghai, a British sorcerer named Baron Harkness summoned Dormammu's mindless ones from the Dark Dimension, causing the deaths of several deadly warriors and leaving Zhang Yi mortally wounded. Using the eyes of the dragon, Zhang Zhu tried to restore his younger brother's power and vitality at the cost of his own life. However, Yi, unwilling to leave the society leaderless, reversed the spell, sacrificing himself and rejuvenating Zhu. This restored Zhu's strength and youth, enabling him to defeat both Harkness and the Mindless Ones. In 1862 CE, the Ancient One grew annoyed at the works of the famed naturalist Charles Darwin, whom he was convinced had too narrow a mind for his liking. After reading On the Origin of Species, enraged at its content, he brought Darwin to Kamar Taj to teach him the lesson that there was more to reality than his science, teleporting him to Earth 95019, a world ruled by monkeys and apes. That year, Dracula helped the Confederacy during the American Civil War with his vampiric Legion of the Damned in exchange for a human bride. The same year, Tyrannus led an invasion of Moloids from Subterranea, bursting through the grounds that would one day be the Ravencroft Institute, interrupting a battle. An ex-Confederate spy, Jeb Lee, was mistaken by a Union soldier because of owning their uniforms for spying purposes. His family was burned alive because of this, and his mutant's powers first manifested as a result. He could transmit through sound a bioauditory cancer that fed on the flesh of all who could hear it. Jeb went back to war, marching from battle to battle and killing all humans in his trail. In 1863 CE, Apocalypse selected Jeb as one of his final Horseman contingency plan. During moments known as Nexus Points, clusters of progress and renewed possibilities, agents of change arose. Philosophers, thinkers, politicians, mystics, martyrs, and messiahs, these individuals were harbingers of hope and better times, but they were hunted by the fallen angel Asmodee, who was rebelling against the fact that God created humans to surpass his other creations in their capacity to create peace and know joy. Abraham Lincoln was one agent of change, and Asmodee orchestrated his death in 1865 CE. That year, American Civil War soldier John Steele was discovered to be a Union spy by a group of Confederate soldiers led by Aloysius Thorndike. While escaping from them, he stumbled into a portal that connected Earth to Mars. The portal was a pathway through a side reality that would become known as the Vanishing Point, where an ancient entity known as the Abyss had been trapped since the dawn of time. Steele, Aloysius, and the Confederate soldiers who were chasing him were tainted by said entity's touch and became his servants. Afterwards, the soldiers created the subversive organization called the Shadow Council and started working towards building an army to give the Abyss. They established 2 bases of operations in each end of the pathway between Earth and Mars they had found. Steele managed to break free of the Abyss controls and was later spotted having super strength and an unbreakable skin, attributes possibly obtained from unknown alien experiments. During the war, a former slave named Caleb purchased his and his wife's freedom. They made a family, but all of them were killed by white supremacists after the war's end. 2 years later, Caleb was resurrected as a ghost rider and obtained revenge on his killers. In 1878 CE, the last known Fist of the Beast, the Hands-High Slayer, Shinsuke, the dread daimyo of Kumamoto, committed seppuku. Baron Homart Zemo was the 10th Baron in the Zemo family lineage. After attempts were made on the life of the German Emperor William I, there was legislation passed that outlawed the Social Democratic Party, which led to a civilian uprising which killed Hobart in 1879 CE. Hobart's descendant from the future, Helmut Zemo, tried to save his life, but went back in time before being able to do so. Huai Jun Fan was the Iron Fist, circa 1878 CE, who was active in the Wild West, especially Texas. He was slain by a Chei Lin, a race of mystic beasts which seek to kill Iron Fists on their 33rd birthdays and use their hearts to gain access to their dragon's egg, which they enjoy consuming. In the Wild West, a cowboy received the power of the Star Brand, becoming the Star Brand Kid alongside his partner Reno Phoenix, avatar of the Phoenix Power. They fought Shi'ar slavers, and later Mephisto with the help of the time-traveling Avengers of the modern age. In 1880 CE, the masked raider was shot to death by unknown assailants and suffered dozens of injuries. Matthew Masters came upon him and removed his mask in an effort to help him, but to no avail, as Gardley died soon after. Masters took the mask and decided to make justice on his killers as the Black Raider. In 1882 CE, in Alberta, Canada, a boy named James Howlett was born in the comfort of a wealthy family, despite the fact that his mother Elizabeth was distant and abusive ever since her first son manifested blades from his hand, proving himself as a mutant, and had to be put to death. Many adventurers and criminals were active in North America's Wild West, some of whom used costumed identities, such as the Two-Gun Kid, the Ghost Rider, later renamed the Phantom Rider, Kid Colt, the Outlaw Kid, the Apache Kid, and the Red Wolf. Other non-masked gunfighters of the era included the Rawhide Kid, the Gunhawks, the Unrelated Gunhawk, and Caleb Hammer. Most of them died in a blaze of glory in 1885 CE, defending the town of Wonderment, Montana from the land-grabbing raiders known as the Night Riders. The Apache Kid died in 1886 CE after arresting railroad tycoon William Tyler for attempting to kill a native leader. Seeking retribution, Tyler's son had the kid ambushed and killed. After this, the kid's estranged wife, Rosa Kerr, became the new Apache Kid and hunted down his killers alongside the Rawhide Kid. By 1888, Dormammu's attempts to break the barrier between the Dark Dimension and Earth remained futile. Seeking an alternative route to exert his influence, he used his formidable power to send a number of parasitic creatures to possess an unwitting victim to act as his agent. The creature arrived on Earth and settled in London, where it took root in the body of a misanthropic 19th century Englishman hunchback named Tom Malvern. Malvern already demonstrated sociopathic tendencies and was resentful at the world for the way it had treated him, but the entity manipulated his scarred psyche, prompting him to commit acts of brutal murder. Active in the largely impoverished Whitechapel area in the latter half of the year, Malvern murdered at least 5 prostitutes. His identity was unknown to Scotland Yard, but the Central News Agency took to calling him Jack the Ripper. On at least 2 occasions, Malvern was pulled forward in time, but was returned to his native era each time, only to be eventually killed by vampires. After Malvern's death, the entity continued to possess people throughout the ages, each one adopting the persona of Jack the Ripper, and Dormammu used these horrific events to spread fear and chaos, destabilizing Earth further. In October, the modern age's Thunderbolts were stranded in Whitechapel. Thunderbolt member Satana's presence roused the spirits of the Iceni, an ancient sect of Wicca who had placed their spirits inside the ancient Londinium, awaiting the arrival of a powerful matriarch who would awaken them. The spirits took possession of the corpses of indigent victims, including the victims of Jack the Ripper, and clashed with the Thunderbolts and Satana. The Iceni were soundly defeated and eliminated. In 1890 CE, Dracula summoned Englishman Jonathan Harker to Castle Dracula on the pretense of buying land. There, Dracula became intrigued by an image of Harker's fiancée, Mina Harker. Holding Harker captive, Dracula traveled to England and enlisted the mad Renfield as his servant. He fed off the people of Whitby, including Mina's closest friend, Lucy Westenra. By the time he had gotten close to Mina and began to enthrall her, Lucy had died, and Harker escaped, mobilizing Dr. John Seward, Abraham Van Helsing, and Quincy Morris to seek out and destroy Dracula. Dracula escaped to Transylvania, but was impaled and decapitated by Seward and Morris. Since the knives Morris and Seward had used were neither wooden nor silver, Dracula had only been somewhat injured, but elected to use his power to transform into mist to trick his attackers into believing him dead. In 1891 CE, the time-traveling mutant Cable faced Jack the Ripper in a tense confrontation in Whitechapel. The encounter left Cable with a lasting reminder of their clash, a permanent scar after the Ripper severed his ear. That same year, a squadron of Skrulls landed on the grounds of the future Ravencroft Institute for the Mentally Insane and planned an invasion of Earth. One of the Skrulls took the form of Theodore Roosevelt. Also that year, at age 9, James discovered he was the product of an affair between his mother and the crass groundskeeper, Thomas Logan, and his son, Dog Logan, was James's half-brother. Eventually, the Logans snapped and stormed the Howlett mansion, attempting to kidnap Elizabeth and murdering her husband. Watching this, James manifested his mutant powers, growing bone blades from the back of his hands and killing Thomas. James gained partial amnesia due to the trauma, but he managed to flee with the help of his playmate who lived in the estate, Rose O'Hara. They took refuge in a stone quarry under the guise of being cousins, and James assumed the name of Logan in order to hide his identity.